The conference room felt different that day. The usual buzz of corporate activity seemed muted as I approached the glass-walled meeting space at the end of the hall. Our office was one of those modern designs, all sleek lines and minimalist furniture, with just enough privacy to conduct business, but enough transparency to remind everyone that we were all being watched. I'd always found a strange comfort in that visibility. It kept things professional, predictable. But today, the predictability I'd come to rely on was about to shatter. I'm Jason Mitchell, Senior Marketing Strategist at Pinnacle Innovations. I've built my reputation on being meticulous, focused, and utterly dedicated to my work. Some colleagues call me intense. I prefer the term committed. My career trajectory has been carefully plotted since graduation, and I've hit every milestone right on schedule. Until Ethan Sullivan arrived 6 months ago. Ethan was everything I wasn't. Effortlessly charming, casually brilliant, and frustratingly laid back about deadlines and protocols. He'd sweep into meetings 5 minutes late with a disarming smile and somehow leave with the client wrapped around his finger. His presentation style was intuitive rather than data-driven, emotional rather than logical. And it worked. That's what irritated me most. We'd been assigned to co-lead the Westbrook campaign, our company's biggest potential account of the year. The partnership wasn't my idea. Our creative director thought Ethan's outside-the-box approach would complement my analytical strategies. I'd been preparing for our strategy meeting all morning, arriving 30 minutes early to set up my presentation and review my notes one last time. The conference room was empty when I arrived, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. I could see storm clouds gathering in the distance, a fitting backdrop for the tension I felt brewing inside me. I arranged my materials precisely on the polished mahogany table, aligning my laptop with the edge, placing my coffee exactly 2 inches to the right. Control in small things helps me maintain composure in larger matters. The door opened behind me, and I knew without turning who it was. Something about the cadence of his footsteps, the subtle scent of his cologne, sandalwood and something citrusy, had become instantly recognizable to me. "Morning, Jason." Ethan's voice carried that perpetual note of amusement, as if he found everything slightly entertaining. "Looks like it's just us today." I turned, maintaining my professional demeanor. "The meeting starts in 20 minutes. I'm sure others will arrive soon." Ethan leaned against the doorframe, his navy blue suit perfectly tailored, but somehow looking more relaxed on him than anyone else could manage. His dark hair was styled in that deliberate messiness that probably took more effort than my neat side part, and his eyes, an unsettling shade of green, seemed to see right through my carefully constructed facade. "Actually," he said, pulling out his phone, "I just got a message from Diane. The client pushed back the presentation until tomorrow. Something about their CEO being called into an emergency board meeting." He slipped his phone back into his pocket and stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind him. "She said she'd email everyone, but I guess you didn't check your phone while setting up your..." He gestured to my meticulous arrangement, command center. I felt a flash of irritation. "I silence notifications when I'm preparing. It helps me focus." "Always so disciplined," Ethan remarked, moving farther into the room. Instead of leaving, as I expected, he walked toward the windows. "Have you noticed how exposed we are in here? Like we're performing for the entire office." Without waiting for my response, he reached for the cord and slowly slid the blinds shut, one window at a time. Each soft click of the blinds closing sent an inexplicable shiver down my spine. The room darkened slightly, creating a sudden intimacy that made me acutely aware of my breathing. The outside world dimmed, and the space between us seemed to contract. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. Ethan turned, that half-smile playing on his lips, creating a little privacy. "Is that a problem?" I should have said yes. I should have gathered my materials and made an excuse to leave. Instead, I stood frozen, watching as he approached, his movements casual yet somehow deliberate. He stopped beside my chair, close enough that I could detect the faint mint on his breath. "You know," he said, his voice lower now, "we've been dancing around each other for months, Jason. Don't you think it's time we talked about it?" "I don't know what you mean," I replied automatically, the corporate defense mechanism kicking in. "We're colleagues working on a project together." Ethan laughed softly, the sound seeming to reverberate in the now enclosed space. Is that really all you think this is? Before I could respond, he placed his hand on the back of my chair and slowly slid it backward, creating space between me and the table. The smooth glide of the wheels on the polished floor seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet room. I remained seated, looking up at him, feeling strangely vulnerable in this new position. He leaned down, placing his hands on the armrests of my chair, effectively bracketing me in place. His face was inches from mine now, close enough that I could see flecks of gold in his green eyes. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, "and I will." My heart hammered against my ribs. The professional part of my brain screamed about workplace policies and harassment protocols, but another part, a part I'd been suppressing for months, maybe years, kept me silent. The tension between us had been building since his first day, masked as professional rivalry, but charged with something far more complicated. I'd noticed the way his gaze lingered on me during meetings, how he seemed to find reasons to touch my arm or shoulder in passing, the way he challenged my ideas not to undermine, but to engage me. I dismissed these observations as paranoia or wishful thinking. Wait, wishful thinking? That admission alone sent a jolt through me. "I've seen how you look at me when you think no one's watching," Ethan continued, his voice gentle but confident. "The same way I look at you." "This is inappropriate," I managed to say, but made no move to push him away or reclaim my space. "Probably," he agreed with a slight nod. "But that doesn't make it any less real." The storm clouds I'd noticed earlier had moved closer, casting the room in a dramatic half-light. A distant rumble of thunder seemed to underscore the moment, like some cosmic acknowledgement of the electricity between us. I started, then stopped, unsure how to continue. I'd never what? Been attracted to a colleague? Been attracted to a man? Been willing to risk my carefully constructed career path for a moment of connection? All of the above felt true. Ethan straightened slightly, giving me a little more space but keeping his hands on my armrests. "I know. That's what makes this interesting." His expression softened. "Look, Jason, I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable, but I'm also tired of pretending there's nothing happening here." I thought back to our first meeting, how instantly irritated I'd been by his casual confidence, how I'd dismissed him as style over substance. But over the months, I'd been forced to acknowledge his brilliance, his genuine insight into client needs, his ability to read people and situations with uncanny accuracy. My irritation had slowly transformed into something else. Admiration, yes, but also a pull I couldn't quite name. "We work together," I said, stating the obvious. "There are rules about this sort of thing." "There are guidelines," Ethan corrected, "and they exist for good reasons. But they don't account for every situation." He finally released my chair, moving to sit on the edge of the conference table, facing me. "I'm not suggesting we announce anything to HR tomorrow. I'm just saying we should stop pretending." The distance he'd created allowed me to think more clearly, but I found I missed his proximity. That realization was startling enough to make me stand up, needing to move, to regain some sense of control. "This is a lot to process," I said, walking toward the windows. Through the slats in the blinds, I could see raindrops beginning to spatter against the glass. "I've never thought of myself as..." I trailed off again. "Labels are overrated," Ethan said behind me. "Attraction is attraction. Connection is connection." I turned to face him. "Is that what this is? Attraction? Connection? You tell me." His directness was both challenging and refreshing. In a corporate world of euphemisms and strategic ambiguity, his clarity was almost shocking. I took a deep breath. "I don't know what to call it. I just know that you've been disrupting my peace of mind since you arrived." A smile spread across his face, not the practiced, charming one he used in client meetings, but something more genuine. "That might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me." Despite myself, I laughed. It wasn't meant as a compliment. "I'll take what I can get." He stood up, moving toward me again, but keeping a respectful distance. "Look, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just wanted to clear the air between us." The rain was falling steadily now, creating a rhythmic backdrop to our conversation. I found myself studying his face more openly than I ever had before. The strong line of his jaw, the way one eyebrow arched slightly higher than the other, the faint shadow of stubble that would emerge by late afternoon. "Remember the Hartman presentation?" he asked suddenly. I nodded. It had been a disaster at first. Our projector failed, the client was irritable, and our backup materials weren't readily accessible. You were so calm, Ethan continued. Everyone else was panicking, but you just took control, redirected the conversation, bought us time to fix the technical issues. I was impressed. It was just crisis management, I said, downplaying it. It was leadership, he countered. That's when I knew there was more to you than the uptight perfectionist you pretend to be. I am an uptight perfectionist, I admitted with a small smile. Among other things. Ethan took another step closer. That's my point. We all contain multitudes, Jason. The person you are in the boardroom doesn't have to be the only version of you that exists. His words struck something deep within me. How long had I been constraining myself to a single narrative? The ambitious professional, the reliable colleague, the perpetual planner. What other aspects of myself had I been denying or suppressing in service of that carefully crafted identity? What exactly are you proposing here? I asked, needing clarity. Dinner, he said simply. Outside of work. Just you and me, having a conversation that isn't about market penetration or brand positioning. The double entendre in market penetration wasn't lost on me, and I felt heat rise to my face. Ethan noticed, of course he did, and his smile widened. Just dinner, he clarified, though his eyes suggested he was open to more. I should have needed time to think about it, to weigh the professional risks against the personal possibilities. But standing there in the dimmed conference room, rain pattering against the windows, the answer seemed surprisingly clear. Okay, I said. Dinner. The word had barely left my lips when a sharp knock on the door made us both jump. We stepped away from each other instinctively as the door opened, revealing our administrative assistant, Marcus. Sorry to interrupt, he said, glancing between us with mild curiosity. Jason, your 11:30 call with Tokyo got moved up. They're on the line in your office. Thanks, Marcus. I'll be right there. My voice sounded remarkably normal considering the circumstances. Marcus nodded and closed the door, leaving us alone again, but with the spell effectively broken. The outside world had intruded, reminding us of our professional obligations. Saved by the bell, Ethan said with a rueful smile. I gathered my materials quickly, my mind already shifting back into work mode. I should go? The Nakamura account is sensitive. Of course. Ethan moved to open the blinds again, letting daylight flood back into the room. How about Friday? For dinner. I paused at the door, briefcase in hand, and looked back at him. In the natural light, he appeared more vulnerable somehow, less the confident charmer, and more just a man taking a risk. Friday works, I confirmed. Text me the details? His smile was answer enough. I stepped into the hallway, adjusting my tie and straightening my shoulders, slipping back into the persona I presented to the world. But something had shifted inside me. A door cracked open that I wasn't sure I could, or wanted to, close again. The rest of the day passed in a blur of conference calls and email responses, but beneath my professional exterior, my mind kept returning to that moment in the conference room. The sliding blinds, the pulled-back chair, the space between us charged with unspoken possibilities. By late afternoon, the storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean and gleaming in the late sunshine. I found myself in the break room, staring absently out the window as I waited for the coffee machine to finish its cycle. Penny for your thoughts? The voice behind me belonged to Lisa, our creative director, and the person who'd paired Ethan and me on the Westbrook campaign. Just reviewing the Tokyo call, I lied smoothly, pouring coffee into my mug. Lisa leaned against the counter, studying me with the perceptive gaze that made her so good at her job. You seem different today. More present. I raised an eyebrow. As opposed to? As opposed to living entirely in your head, like you usually do. She smiled to soften the observation. It's a good look on you. Before I could respond, the break room door opened again, and Ethan walked in. Our eyes met briefly, and I felt that same electric recognition from earlier. He nodded casually to both of us. Lisa, Jason, he acknowledged, moving to the refrigerator as if it were any other day, as if he hadn't completely upended my sense of self hours earlier. I was just telling Jason he seems different today, Lisa remarked, looking between us with interest. Ethan pulled out a bottle of water, his expression giving nothing away. Maybe he's finally learning to live a little. He winked at me, so quickly I might have imagined it, then turned to Lisa. Do you have a minute to discuss the visual direction for Westbrook? I had some thoughts after reviewing the competitor analysis. They left together, Ethan launching into a discussion about brand aesthetics as naturally as if our encounter in the conference room had never happened. But as he passed me, he discreetly slipped a folded note onto the counter beside my coffee. When I was alone, I unfolded it to find an address written in his bold handwriting, followed by 8 p.m. Friday. Casual dress. Looking forward to seeing the real Jason. I refolded the note carefully and placed it in my pocket, feeling like a character in a spy novel rather than a marketing executive. The secrecy should have bothered me. I'd always valued transparency and directness, but instead, I found it thrilling. A private connection in our very public lives. The next 2 days passed with excruciating slowness. Ethan and I maintained our professional relationship in meetings and group settings, though I caught him watching me more than once, a knowing look in his eyes that made concentration difficult. Our presentation to Westbrook went flawlessly, our different approaches blending into a compelling strategy that won unanimous approval. "You two make a surprisingly good team," our CEO commented afterward. Who would have thought? Ethan caught my eye across the conference table, the same one where he'd slid my chair back, and smiled. "Sometimes the most unexpected combinations yield the best results," he replied. By Friday evening, I was a bundle of nerves. I changed outfits 3 times, finally settling on dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that a previous date had once told me brought out my eyes. The thought gave me pause. Was this a date? Ethan had been clear about wanting to explore our connection, but we hadn't labeled it. Perhaps that was for the best. The address led me to a small restaurant in a part of the city I rarely visited, a neighborhood known for its art galleries and independent bookstores rather than the upscale establishments where client dinners typically took place. The space was intimate, with exposed brick walls and soft jazz playing in the background. Ethan was already seated at a corner table, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him in a simple black button-down and jeans. He stood as I approached, his smile warming his entire face. "You came," he said, as if he'd half expected me to change my mind. I said I would. I sat across from him, acutely aware that this was the first time we'd been alone together outside of work. True, but saying and doing are different things. He poured me a glass of wine from the bottle already on the table. "You're a man of your word. I like that about you." The evening unfolded with surprising ease. Away from the office, Ethan was still charming but less performative, more willing to share his own uncertainties and vulnerabilities. I learned about his childhood in a small Midwestern town, his struggle to come out to his traditional family, his winding path through various creative industries before finding his place in marketing. In turn, I found myself opening up about my own life, my parents' high expectations, my carefully plotted career goals, and the growing sense that something essential was missing despite my professional success. "When did you know?" I asked eventually, the wine and comfortable atmosphere making me bolder. "About yourself, I mean." Ethan considered the question, swirling the last of his wine thoughtfully. "I think I always knew on some level, but I didn't have the language for it until college." He looked at me directly. "What about you?" I stared into my glass, searching for honesty. "I've had relationships with women. They were fine, pleasant enough, but something was always missing." I took a deep breath. I've been attracted to men before, but I never acted on it. It seemed complicated, especially professionally. "It can be," Ethan acknowledged, "but so is denying a fundamental part of yourself." The conversation shifted to lighter topics: favorite films, travel experiences, the absurdities of corporate culture. We laughed more than I expected, finding common ground in our observations of office politics and client peculiarities. By the time we finished dessert, a chocolate torte we agreed to share, 3 hours had passed in what felt like minutes. Outside the restaurant, the night air was cool and clear. We stood on the sidewalk, suddenly awkward again, the easy flow of conversation interrupted by the question of what came next. "Can I walk you home?" Ethan asked. "Or is that too cliché?" I smiled. "I'm only a few blocks away, and I don't mind clichés when they're sincere." We walked slowly, our shoulders occasionally brushing, talking about nothing important but enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. When we reached my building, I hesitated, unsure of the protocol for ending a night that wasn't officially a date but felt like so much more. Ethan solved the dilemma by leaning in and kissing me softly on the cheek, his lips lingering just long enough to make my heart race. Thank you for taking a risk, he said quietly. I know it wasn't easy. It was easier than I expected, I admitted. Being with you, I mean. His smile and response was worth every moment of uncertainty I'd felt. Good night, Jason. I'll see you Monday. I watched him walk away, feeling both settled and unsettled, as if something fundamental had shifted in my understanding of myself. The conference room moment hadn't been an anomaly or a professional misstep. It had been the first honest interaction in a relationship that had been building since we met. Monday morning arrived with its usual flurry of emails and meetings. I entered the office with a strange mix of anticipation and apprehension, unsure how our dynamic would translate back into the workplace. I needn't have worried. Ethan was the consummate professional, treating me with the same respect and collaborative spirit as always, though his eyes held a warmth that was new. We found our rhythm, colleagues during office hours, something more in the margins of our professional lives. Coffee before work, occasional dinners, text messages that made me smile at inappropriate moments during meetings. We were careful, discreet, mindful of company policies and office gossip. But sometimes, when we found ourselves alone in the conference room, that same conference room where everything had started, Ethan would slide the blinds shut with a meaningful glance, creating a momentary privacy in which we could simply be ourselves, no pretenses, no professional masks. And sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, he would roll my chair back just slightly as he passed, a private reminder of the moment when everything changed, when the space between us became charged with possibility rather than competition. I don't know what the future holds for us. Office romances are complicated for anyone, let alone two men in leadership positions. But I do know that when he slid those blinds shut and rolled my chair back that day, he created an opening, not just between us, but within me. A space where I could finally acknowledge the parts of myself I'd been denying for too long. Sometimes the most significant moments in our lives happen in the most ordinary places. For me, it was a corporate conference room with its polished table and ergonomic chairs. For you, it might be somewhere entirely different. But when that moment comes, when someone creates a space for you to be fully yourself, my advice is simple. Don't roll your chair away. Total _char_count. 18,856.